Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Gabrielle Canonico. I come from the U.S. Integrated Ocean Observing System and the Marine Biodiversity Observation Network, and I'm very happy to be moderating this session focused on development of the Air Center mission on observation and policies for improved resources management for the oceans, coasts, and marine ecosystems. This includes interests in promoting the sustainable development of ocean and coastal ecosystems, enhancing capacity for good governance of marine and coastal biodiversity, and raising awareness for local communities and decision makers on the economic value of the ecosystem and mechanisms for sustainable development. Coastal observation is the process to design, implement, and operate observing and information management systems that seek to monitor and forecast the status and trends of coastal processes. This includes the action and interaction of the atmosphere, waves, currents, and tides, rivers, and the geology of a region, and the myriad organisms and biological and biogeochemical interactions that occur over short time and space scales in coastal areas and shelf seas. Observing systems have profound relevance to people as they provide the information that helps people plan and use these coastal areas. This session presents local case studies and international frameworks that seek to define more effective and responsive coastal observing systems, make linkages with multidisciplinary global ocean observing systems, and the collection of and curation of observations on relevant, essential ocean variables. The speakers will each take 10 minutes to discuss recommendations and convergence on ocean best practices that simultaneously promote a vibrant blue economy and the conservation of marine resources. Those presentations will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A session. We invite you for a further discussion after the Q&A. 10 minutes before the end of our session today, you'll receive a link in the chat that you can click to join a breakout room where we can continue that discussion. So without any further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. I'll introduce the first speaker before his presentation, and then I'll introduce the other speakers as we go. So we're going to start with Tommy Bornman from the South African Environmental Observation Network. Tommy completed his undergraduate and postgraduate studies at the University of Port Elizabeth, now the Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University, majoring in marine botany with projects ranging from oceanic phytoplankton, macroalgal mariculture, and estuarine macrophyte ecology. In 2011, he was appointed as the manager of the El Wando coastal node of SAEON. So, Tommy, you'll get us started, and thank you for speaking.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. Can you all see my screen? Perfect, thank you very much. And thank you for the invitation to speak at the All Atlantic Summit on Coastal Observations. Now, to improve the management of coastal resources require access to reliable scientific long-term data. And that is exactly the reason why the shallow marine and coastal research infrastructure was developed in South Africa. So, SAEON, the South African Environmental Observation Network, developed the Algoa Bay Sentinel site for long-term ecological research in 2008. And the success of this LTR site, although only 13 years, led to the development of the shallow marine and coastal research infrastructure that will see the expansion of this concept to other Sentinel sites around the coast of South Africa. And this is a very new coastal observation network that we are busy rolling out at the moment. Some of the sites on the west coast on the Atlantic seaboard include a satellite site, as well as the 2 ocean sentinel sites around Cape Town, as well as a sentinel site in the sub-Antarctic in the Southern Ocean on Marion Island. All these sites are intensively instrumented, but there's also quite a few research platforms that cover the entire coastline, and I'll briefly go through each of those. Okay, so just although this is in the Indian Ocean, this is the concept of the Sentinel site, and the coastal environment is extremely variable, so it's difficult to study all variables in all habitats along a 3,000-kilometer coastline, and that's why we went for the Sentinel site approach, where we intensively study one area and hope to apply the lessons we learn there to the rest of the bioregion. And we study the entire ecosystem from the catchments through the estuaries into the embayments, over the shelf, and link it into offshore observatories. In these sentinel sites, we measure a range of GEOS essential ocean variables and essential biodiversity variables at various spatial and temporal scales, but I won't go through these, but I'll make my presentation available for people that are interested. And the infrastructure at each of these sentinel sites include fully equipped coastal research crafts and vessels, a suite of instruments to measure a range of variables, and the flagship really is real-time met-ocean coastal observation moorings that until recently has not existed in South Africa. These real-time coastal observation moorings will be deployed in shallow 30 meters depth and will be equipped with seabird CTD, SAMI PCO2 and pH sensors, AWAC, ADCPs, VEMCO acoustic receivers, and temperature recorders. Now, our colleagues in Brazil from SimCosta are quite a few years ahead of us on this concept, but I have discussed this with some colleagues over there to look and to learn from the lessons and the experience they have in the deployment of their shallow coastal observation network. One thing our moorings do not have as yet is flux, but we will look to collaborate with colleagues to do that as well. Obviously, access to research vessels is difficult and it's expensive, so we've got a fleet of smaller research craft estuarine vessels to service these sentinel sites and the satellite sites, and these are fully equipped with CTDs, bongo nets, multi-beam, etc. So they can do anything a research vessel does at a fraction of the cost, of course. We also have a central biogeochemistry lab where all the samples from the different satellite sentinel sites are sent to for analysis for nutrients, chlorophyll A, carbon, heavy metals, microplastics, and we also have a microscopy lab to study the lower trophic level of the ecosystem, phytoplankton and zooplankton. Because most of our instruments are under the ocean, some do not reach the surface. We've got a fully functional and equipped research dive unit with a hyperbaric chamber to service these instruments. We take part with several other government departments in the National Estuaries Network, and you will notice that the west coast of Southern Africa is very arid, similar to the west coast of South America and North America. So we've got very few estuaries, only 4 in South Africa really of any significance. Namibia's got even less, and Southern Angola even less. So comparative studies on estuaries is not really something that we will look for with our colleagues across the Atlantic because of the differences. We also run a marine remote imagery platform consisting of a suite of instruments that most people would be familiar with. And the purpose of these is to collect data on biodiversity, to do biodiscovery, and to do resource studies such as fisheries management in marine protected areas and so forth. We also run the South African Coastal Temperature Network, which consists of 173 loggers around the coast of South Africa. Some of these data sets go back 45 years and has been instrumental for us to better understand the changes in species movement up and down the coast. We're busy rolling out this network further up the coast towards Namibia and into Mozambique as well. We also run the acoustic telemetry or tracking array platform, which consists currently of over 100 receivers, mostly along the south and east coast of South Africa. So you can see very few receivers on the west coast. And if you look at the global telemetry activity, you can see very few receivers on the west coast of Africa and on the east coast of South America. So through this shallow marine and coastal research infrastructure, we're trying to fill these gaps at the moment. We also have an airborne remote sensing platform, which is a light sports aircraft equipped for photogrammetry, infrared and thermal sensors, as well as LiDAR. And we're looking at procuring hyperspectral sensors downstream. If you listen to some of the other talks earlier this week, it's important if you've got an in situ observing system to also look at remote sensing, whether satellite or airborne, and couple that with modeling to get a better understanding of ecosystems. And of course, this is a valuable tool for socio-economic studies along the coastline as well. Data management platform, very important. I'm not going to speak much to this except to say that all our data is free and open by default, and we conform to the FAIR principles. Science engagement, like for most entities, very important to us, but especially as a third world country where there's a lot of poverty and the legacy of apartheid has prevented people access to the coast. We try and reach out to learners in the schools and to the public to bring the ocean to them and give them a better understanding of the ocean environment and the importance of looking after it. We also have several citizen science projects, and all this has eventually spun up so that we are now at a point where we are changing our LTER sites to LTSER sites, so social ecological systems. Our strength has always been on the oceans and the biophysical environment. We're now looking at the ecosystem goods and services that these provide to society, and then what actions and adaptations are needed to improve the health not only of the oceans and the environment, but at the same time, society. Okay, so there are really two realities in coastal observation, in my opinion, in a post-COVID-19 world, and that is a reduction in budgets. I'm sure you are all fearing it or have already felt it. And the secondly is an urgent need to speak to the powers that be and the funders to continue and sustain these coastal observations into the future, because the pandemic that we now faced is small in comparison to the climate crisis that we are going to be facing in the very near future. And what we need really as a community is to create and support an active coastal observation community. I know GEOS tried a few times through their strategy, their coastal strategy. They developed a decade or more ago, and they're trying to, through the PICO and the regional alliances, to bring that up again. But as far as I can see, it's only GEOS and IOOS that are really getting that right. We looked with a colleague, Jose Milbert from Brazil, at ILTA as a platform for global coastal and ocean observation, and you can see there's 130 sites around the world registered on the DAMS database. But we all know that there are many more coastal observations taking place in the world that are not listed yet. And I think it is important that we create this community so that we can share experiences, especially around sensor development, so that we can conform to international best practice, and that we can develop standard operating procedures specifically for the coastal zone to ensure integration and interoperability between different observing systems around the Atlantic. We need to ensure that our data is findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. Otherwise, the managers that look after our coastline and develop policies do not have sufficient information to manage that. Oops, sorry. And it's important that we collect data to improve coastal modeling, specifically for coastal ocean forecasting systems. And then lastly, to be sustainable, research infrastructures or observing systems must be responsive to societal need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tommy. So we will, that was my timer. We will hold questions until the end of, till after all the speakers, and then we'll have a Q&A. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Regina Folorunsho. Regina is a director and head of department of the Marine Meteorology and Climate in the Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research. Regina holds a PhD and Master of Science in Geography with emphasis in meteorology and oceanography, both from the University of Lagos. So thank you, Regina, and I think we'll have your slides shared momentarily.
I want to thank the organizers for having me this very important summit. I'll be speaking on marine observations and policies for improved data management of oceans, coasts, and marine ecosystem, the Nigerian experience. For introduction, the marine environment. Next, please. Yes, the marine environment is a complex area featuring diverse biological, physiochemical, and geomorphological ecosystem. And to understand and predict the physical, chemical, and biological processes at play involves observational network structure that calls for an integrated and interdisciplinary approach. A good understanding of meteorological and oceanographic conditions reduces uncertainties in engineering specification and also enhances safety and operational efficiency. The provision of high quality marine observational data sets is the first step in the development of any offshore coastal engineering or renewable energy project. Next slide, please. The types of data or the types of marine observational data we are looking at here is the land-based, meteorological, ocean and drifting buoys, living resources like stock assessment. Next, please. Coastal observations that over the years Nigeria has been part of is the GEOS, which is a global network of ships. We had the tide gauge installed in our jetty, and over the years we had a lot of data. We also collaborated with NOAA in terms of ship opportunity. We are part of the Global Observance System, and also now we are involved in the GMS and Africa project, which is an African Union and European Union initiative. Next slide, please. And for marine and coastal resource management, the policy and programs for action exist under the national and state authorities to enforce the policies and strategies on the environment. These agencies include the Federal Ministry of Environment, Department of Petroleum Resources, Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety Agency, Federal Department of Fisheries, the National Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency, the Nigerian Meteorological Agency, and state ministries of environment. Next, please. I want to share with you the Institute for Oceanography, the experience from Nigeria. The Nigerian Institute for Oceanography was established in 1975. The scientific objective of the Institute is to collect relevant, long-term, and accurate data on the physical evolution of the coast and marine environment, and most importantly, the Institute aims to increase the understanding and predictive capability of coastal dynamics in the context of increased coastal urbanization and threats to climate change through the development of innovative numerical model. An overarching goal of NIOMR is to support evidence-based policies and contribute to sustainable coastal risk management in the regions threatened by erosion and other hazards. We also collaborate with most global observance systems, as I've mentioned before. Next slide, please. First of all, let me introduce to you the coastal and marine environment of Nigeria. The coastal land covers over 20,000 square kilometers of swamp. 60% of that in Africa is in the Niger Delta. The offshore marine area covers more than 210,000 square kilometers. The national population is over 206 million people, and the coastal population is 30% of that national population. The resources are oil and gas, fish and shellfish resources, fuel and minerals, wetlands, and a variety of other things. These support the variety of coastal activities and its attendant threats. Next, please. Yeah, for observational and management strategies in Nigeria of the non-living resources, over the years, especially from the 1980s, we've carried out coastal dynamics survey, and it is still ongoing. We have 10 major stations with 18 minor stations. The observations are carried out on monthly basis, and this is to determine the rates of erosion on the different morphological zones. This has informed the government on policies and decisions concerning the coastal environment. From 1992 to 1998, we had the gloss tide gauge system, and this helped in understanding the met ocean parameters that induce flooding and storm surges along the coast of Nigeria. It helped to inform the government on the need to install several tide gauges along the coast. In 2000, the nearshore environment, a bathymetric survey, which we were able to understand. There were several surveys, that is to understand the tuna, the pelagic and demersal fish stock in the coastal environment. And this survey helped in the mapping of fisheries resources in terms of species, composition, abundance, and distribution. Next slide, please. So for the marine and coastal resource management policy and programs, we have to ask these questions, whether it applies in Nigeria. Research results should contribute to formulation of advice on resource management, policy issues, and decision-making. Yes, this applies in this country because anytime there is need for the government to formulate a policy, the Institute for Oceanography is brought along, and their contribution it helps to formulate the policies. For example, for the flow of information between relevant agencies and sectors, we are always invited by the Ministry of Environment to come and sit on the Environmental Impact Assessment Forum to determine whether companies, institutions are following the right procedure before allocations are, before areas are allocated to them. And then to create a fair and transparent consultation framework to sensitize administrators and economic operators. Yes, we are always at the forefront of environmental, coastal environmental issues or offshore issues. For example, the Institute has been at the forefront of understanding the offshore issues in terms of claiming more extended continental shelf areas in the continental shelf, and to promote public enlightenment of coastal dwellers. Yes, the coastal dwellers know the Institute for Oceanography to be able to give them undiluted information about the state of the coastal environment. Next, please. So, do we have this in place? Are we able to identify areas of conflicting uses in the coastal zone and establish an effective coastal zone management scheme? This is a little bit not totally attained because still we have the agencies operating in sectorial aspects. However, we still come together, but we have not formed an integrated coastal zone management. And then we need to intensify research and institutional framework in Nigeria. This is also a bit not totally achieved. There has to be enhancement of capacity for observation, collected and analysis of scientific data. A lot of the old members of staff who are capable of carrying out the observations have left the system, some of them because of brain drain. We need to employ more people. We need to train the new, the millennials in this scientific analysis. And do we have to promote regular, we have to promote regular environmental monitoring. This needs a lot of funds. And right now, that is not going very well for us. So we have to promote science-based decision-making in marine science when, for example, there is enough monitoring going on and we have current data, to use as a leverage for our suggestions. Next slide, please. In conclusion, I want to say that an integrated approach capable of bringing together the multiple interwoven overlapping interests of the marine area in a coordinated and rational manner is very important. We have to harness coastal resources for optimum social and economic benefit for present and future generations. The government needs to fund the research institutions so that we can have more to say in the resource management and policy issues in Nigeria. Thank you for your attention.
Regina, thank you very much. I would now like to welcome João Vitorino. João is a physical oceanographer at the Instituto Hidrográfico, the Portuguese hydrographic office, with more than 25 years of experience. The activity he develops is centered in the study of the physical oceanography of Portuguese coastal ocean areas and in the implementation and improvement of monitoring capacities and assimilation modeling capacities for those areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to start by thanking the organization of the event for this opportunity to be here and to show you briefly the activity that Instituto Hidrográfico, the Portuguese Hydrographic Office, develops in the area of coastal ocean observation. Well, the Portuguese coastal ocean spans over very diverse environments, from the Portuguese continental margin offshore the Portuguese mainland to the coastal ocean areas offshore the islands of the Azores archipelago or the Madeira archipelago. In the course of 6 decades of activity, Instituto Hidrográfico developed a broad range of capacities to observe and to approach these coastal ocean areas. Namely, the capacity for conducting the hydrographic surveys with high resolution hydrographic surveys of these very coastal areas and in the global coastal ocean area, and the production of cartographies, maps of these bathymetric characteristics. Also, the capacity is to conduct bottom sediment analysis and sampling, and to build charts for the bottom sedimentary cover. And also by installing a number of observing systems that we integrate now in the MONISEA real-time monitoring infrastructure that I present here. A lot of these capacities are installed along the Portuguese mainland, but also extend to the Azores and Madeira archipelagos. And this infrastructure that integrates several networks is comprised by fixed platforms installed offshore the coast that comprise, for example, multiparametric buoys, such as the one presented in the scheme in the right, that can conduct measurements in the atmosphere, at the sea surface, or in the water column, or the more classical wave buoys that can measure the waves offshore and also can provide surface temperature measurements. Another component of this monitoring infrastructures are the coastal stations, the traditional tide gauge stations that are installed at ports along the Portuguese coast. And also more recently, HF radar stations that can provide the surface current field in the large area, and from which we can also build and derive a number of interesting drift products that have importance in the support to a number of users. Well, this monitoring infrastructure is what I consider our backbone to the capacity to track the long-term evolution of the ocean conditions, and particularly the coastal ocean conditions, and to identify what is the natural evolution, what are the natural variations that belong to the system, or what are the trends, and in the trends, what is the natural climate change processes, and what is the evolution that is linked to anthropogenic impacts. We can, for example, see this and make this distinction in the sea surface conditions that I show here for several areas along our coast, or also on the sea level evolution that is measured by the tide gauges along the coast, and which we can use also to put in the perspective of what are the assessments done at international level and what is the future scenarios that are forecast by a number of climatic models. So we can use this information also to validate and to assess this scenario, future scenarios. Of course, this monitoring infrastructure, this real-time monitoring infrastructure, is also our main instrument for the support of the local communities, for the politics at national or local level, and also for the blue economy sectors. I present here, for example, an example of measurements collected by one of our buoys offshore our area, where in a period during the days it was important to inform about the arrival of the impacts of a major storm. But a few days later, it was important to provide support to the surface community, and in this case, also to a lot of touristic activities related to these big surface activities in the Nazaré Canyon area. Now, crises and major crises at sea are, for us, also the opportunities to evaluate what is missing, what we need to improve. And in 2002, we have this main crisis, the Prestige oil spill crisis, where this big tanker just sank several hundreds of kilometers offshore the Portuguese coast, the Portuguese-Spanish coast, and the big spills were then moving towards our coastal ocean area. And what is important is that the dispersion of these big spills covered a big area of several thousand kilometers, affecting Portugal, Spain, France, due to the process that are related to the slope, due to the presence of an important poleward slope current, the Iberian poleward slope current, that we can see here from the tracks of drifters that were launched offshore and then entered in the slope and then continued along the slope for a lot of big distance. So the success at this point of the numerical models used for the forecast in these conditions was also linked to our capacity to incorporate knowledge about this process. At that moment, this was made based on previous observations, so we didn't have observations that were contemporary of the accident, and some success was available, but this really indicated us the need for assuring a permanent monitoring of the coastal ocean environment. Of course, we have satellite imagery. We have also these HF radar measurements. Both can cover a big area and then can provide us data with frequency enough to track the evolution of these systems. But in these coastal ocean environments, we have processes that develop as short spatial scales, sometimes also at short temporal scales, that are very important, and not only for the global circulation in the coastal ocean environment, but also for the biology, for the life in these areas. For example, these closed circulation cells that here are associated with the presence of the submarine canyon, and that develop during periods of transition of wind forcing that are not really depicted or identified in the satellite imagery. The HF radars can, in fact, provide a view of these processes, but still this is a surface information. And this process, like the slope current that I mentioned during the Prestige crisis, are processes that affect the water column, that are linked to the water column. So we need to assure a permanent three-dimensional cover of the ocean. With autonomous systems, that's a possibility, although we are collaborating with several partners at national, international level with different systems from AUVs, gliders, surface vehicles. But still, we need to understand how these systems operate in the coastal ocean environment that is packed with activities, with fishing devices, with fishing activities, with other kinds of activities. So we need to understand the best strategies to operate these systems there. Well, of course, we can use the traditional approach using by surveys conducted by vessels, but these are costly, and we can have this kind of operation in the area during perhaps 1 or 2 or 3 periods of the year, not in permanence. So here, the importance is to the link to the use of the local communities to engage them in this effort of maintaining the monitoring of the coastal ocean areas. We are starting some experiments and some contacts with coastal population, for example, in this case, using low-cost sensors developed for installation in fish, to use the divers community to conduct measurements, and also to install on board the fishing vessels to collect data and to evaluate the add value of this citizen science data to the effort of observing and forecasting the coastal ocean environment. A final note that we must understand that the systems, the infrastructures, the monitoring infrastructures that we are using to answer to problems at a local and or national scale are also the same infrastructures that contribute with pieces of information for the big puzzle that are the global questions, or in this case, the pan-European cache questions. So this MONOS-AIS system is contributing to the GeoRecord research infrastructure for the coastal ocean. And in this community of several countries in Europe, we can discuss important questions of harmonization, best practices, interoperability. And so we can build a community that can use all these different systems to build the global picture and the global image of the evolution of the coastal ocean. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Segen Estefen, has a bachelor's in civil engineering from the Federal University of Juiz de Fora, master in ocean engineering from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and PhD in civil engineering from Imperial College in London. He is currently a full professor at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. He has experience in ocean engineering, acting on the following subjects: ocean structures. He is the coordinator of more than 100 R&D projects and consultancy work for energy companies and suppliers, including oil and gas and renewables. Thank you, Segen.
Thank you, Gabrielle, for the introduction. And thank you for the invitation from the organizers. The idea of my presentation is to focus on observing systems that we have in Brazil, but they need to be put together and to be more coordinated. And we have been, oh, sorry. Oh, no, it's fine. Okay. We have been working for some time in an institute, National Institute for Ocean Research. And the idea of this institute, that is, the process is in final stages from the Brazilian government, is try to interact the scientific and technological activities in the ocean, try to coordinate different initiatives. And the main aim of this institute is the interaction among national research groups, the correlation between research work in progress and the global challenges, especially climate change, and establish a kind of institute award for the associated labs and research centers that could fulfill the aims and the priorities of the institute. And we will focus on 4 big areas. And among these areas, the technology and innovation will take care of the observation and monitoring of the ocean. And as you can see in this block, technology and innovation, the last one, we can work together not only with the observation, but we would like also to provide data for the blue economy. One of these examples is the ocean renewable energy. And I will show you later how we'll try to do this, to interact the observation with initiatives for this blue economy. Of course, the GEOS is a landmark for all these observations. And GEOS was established in 1981, and it set the standards for observation of the oceans. And in Brazil, we have what we call GEOS Brazil. And GEOS Brazil, the main programs, my idea is try to explain the main programs that we are carry on in Brazil presently. One of these is Pirata, a system. It is an observation system based on moored buoys to monitor a series of variables and the interaction between the ocean and atmosphere in the tropical Atlantic. It is a cooperation, Brazil, France, and United States. The other one is PN-BOIA. It's the National Buoys Program. That is a data collection from a few points in islands, Brazilian islands, and also from the Navy and merchant ships in navigation in the South and tropical Atlantic. It has also a field deriving buoys, and all these systems, all this data are focused on another database from the Navy and make available for the scientific community. The other program that we have is directly related to the sea level variations, and is a program that, of course, interact with the GEO Global, and is focused on a specific use for port operations, fishing, aquaculture, minerals, and coastal and recreation development. And finally, the MOVA. MOVA, it's the monitoring of ocean variability in long scales, years and decades. And it uses opportunity ships in a route that is between Rio de Janeiro and the island of Trinidad, that is a Brazilian island. It's about 1,200 kilometers, the full distance. And this data is accumulated and in a comparative way to identify the variability in long scale of the ocean in this area. And then I tried to move. We have not a long time for, it's just a short time for this presentation. And I try to base the coastal observing and modeling systems in Brazil in a paper that is in preparation by a colleague, a professor, Guilherme Franz, from the Federal University of Paraná. And he outlined a series of programs that we have in the coastal area. And initially is the SINCOSTA. SINCOSTA is the Brazilian coastal monitoring system that has been approved for the Minister of Environment and Minister of Science and Technology of Brazil in 2011. And it collects, processes, and distributes high-quality meta-ocean data to the end users, based on the GCOC recommendation, as usual. And we have a series of measurements being made, 12 sea level stations, tidal gauge with frequency less than 1 hour, and 12 mooring coastal buoys are also employed. And the tidal gauges are installed along the entire coast of Brazil, mainly in ports, and the buoys are concentrated in a few states, mostly on the south of the country. The other important program that we have, it's the HEMO. It's the Oceanographic Modeling and Observation Network that has been implemented with focus on scientific and technology development of operational oceanography. And it covers South Atlantic and regions along the Brazilian coast. The REMO supports the Brazilian Navy for dissemination of meta-ocean information and safety for navigation in an extensive area of the Brazilian Ocean Exclusive Economic Zone. In this program, we have an important participation of the research center of Petrobras, that is a Brazilian oil company, and this company has important activities offshore Brazil, and the observing network in this sense is quite important for the safety of the offshore operations. The other system, much more recent system, it's the Brazilian Sea Observatory. It is using a prototype of coastal monitoring system and operational modeling system for the coast. It started in 2018, and there is a cooperation with the Center for Marine Studies from the Federal University of Paraná and Maritec from the Instituto Superior Técnico from the University of Lisbon in this modeling system. It has a regional scale model for the southeastern Brazilian shelf. Is the first domain of the operational model system with horizontal grid resolution of 3 by 3 kilometers and 50 layers along the depth with less than 1 meter thickness near the surface. That's the pilot system that they intend to develop further for the other parts of the country. There is also some observation in the Amazon coast. Brazil has 8,500 kilometers of coast, and of course, the north of the country is covered by the Amazon coast. And the Amazon coast covers approximately 1,000 kilometers in this coastline with quite energetic environments of great global importance, such as the Amazon River. It's the big discharger of fluvial flow in this area. And this started in 2009, and it's in progress now. The other one, it's the Brazilian Network for Ocean Acidification, BROA. That's the name of a cake. Maybe in Portugal is the same name, I don't know. And this is an initiative that started in 2012 and to identify the most sensitive ecosystem like coral reefs and rhodolith. And it's tried to cover a quite substantial extension of the coast, but it's more concentrated in the east and northeast of the Brazilian shelf. And,
We've reached 10 minutes. Oh,
yeah.
And you're wrapping up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's because I lost the time here. This is the last slide. It's a Azul project. It's the Blue project. That is an initiative for the Santos Basin. It's a long-term observation. It combines observation with modeling. And some measurements we have been using as data for the ocean renewable and offshore wind energy assessment. That's a way that we can interact this observation with the blue economy. I think this is the whole picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our final speaker, Sergio Rossi, joins us from the Università del Salento in Italy, where he is a research scientist, specializing in marine natural resources and biological oceanography, with a focus on the health indicators of coastal benthic suspension feeder populations, flows of matter and energy in benthic pelagic coupling, the animal forests as carbon sinks, and the management and conservation of benthic marine wildlife. He has been working in the animal forests of warm temperate, polar, tropical, and cold temperate seas. We'll move into a question and answer period directly following this presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for the Art Center at the Penn State University, and also for the others to just make this possible. I'm very happy to be here, and I want to just make a snapshot of how the actual restoration plans that we are developing can be a perfect platform to see for this money that we are just asking for, and some of the current speakers are also claiming. So, in fact, we are in a big problem. We all know that. What we have to do with this climate change and also these global change problems, we have huge problems, and it seems that finally, because economy is also touched with this kind of impacts everywhere. Now we can see everywhere. We are just waking up a little bit. In this wake up, we can be in some way, we can be very happy. Oceanographers, both physical oceanographers, biological oceanographers, chemical oceanographers, all the people that is making his or her job on the oceans can be very happy, because United Nations dedicate a decade, this decade from 2021 to 2030, for the oceans. The oceans, seeing that the oceans could be a key part of our lives. I think that many of us, all of us, knew it well before, but now we have the opportunity to do something different. And we based a project and we proposal that we are making now in these so-called nature-based solutions, in which we want to just make sure that we have the opportunity not to have the pristine areas that we have had, that we had just 100, 150 years ago, but making something in which we ensure that we have a healthy set of systems that give us the opportunity also to have a healthy life. And the oceans are a key point in this case. So in this basic network solutions, one of the organisms that may be of most interest are the ecosystem engineer organisms. These organisms, like for example, the trees, give shelter, food, give the opportunity to many other organisms to have what we understand in the human society as commodities, okay, or facilities. Well, these organisms make, with the three-dimensional structure, make possible this for many organisms all over the world, in the terrestrial world. But also, we have the marine forest on the water that have exactly the same rule, to provide for several services to the ecological community in this case, and also to humans, of course, but especially to the community that is underwater. In shallow areas, but also in very deep areas, because we have also the cold water corals, for example, which can be envisaged as a marine forest. We have kelp forest. We have also, as you know, these seagrasses all over the coastal areas, which make these three-dimensional structures that give really the opportunity to many other organisms to make their lives better. And why the forests of the sea are so important, I just will give a snapshot, giving you some tips that are interesting to see and to understand why we should preserve it and why we should monitor them and how we can do it in a profitable way. They act as barriers for hurricanes and storms. We know it very well, both for the coral reefs in shallow areas and also with Posidonia oceanica, for example, near to in the Mediterranean coast, to give two examples. The forests of the sea are also key habitats for many stages, life stages of the species, in which they close their cycles or they have a particular part of their lives in which they are there living and growing. Of course, they're also part of the cycle or shelter species which are of commercial interest and are directly fished or harvested. and they transform the near bottom hydrodynamics due to the complexity of their structures. They also are biodiversity hotspots, both Posidonia, also the forest, but you know very well also the coral reefs or the deep water corals. And they are a key factor in biogeochemical cycles, being also important as tourist attractions. And just to say something, last but not least, if you make this kind of list and you show this kind of list, don't forget that these forests of the sea are essential carbon immobilizers through the structures, through the sediments they retain, and so on and so on and so on. So what is our idea? Our idea is just to preserve this kind of forest. To make this, what we are doing is try to take all the experience that we have from the silviculture and gardening and put it on the sea, okay? Make this kind of activity possible. And to do that, what we are doing is just making structures on the water, okay? What we call symbiotic reefs, in which you can put and transplant many organisms, making possible the three-dimensional structures, making possible that all these organisms live transplanted from nurseries that will be available also through the recruitment, and to enrich, to make really an oasis, applying all the tools that we already have, the knowledge that we already have from marine ecology, biology, and also the technology that we have available from aquaculture, okay? In this case, and this is the key point, both for the restoration and the monitoring, when we envisage is a participatory process. In this participatory process, and this is the important thing, we engage people, but not only from volunteers. We make a business from this kind of approach. We just make the shift from the volunteer to a business in which touristic facilities give the opportunity to make large-scale restoration programs in which the people make the transplantation and monitor the transplantation through the time. And this is very important because then you have the opportunity to make structures to restore areas and make structures of monitoring in which you may have buoys of observational buoys, you may have zooplankton analysis, phytoplankton analysis, nutrient analysis, routinely made by people that is working on the facilities, but also follow it up by the people that is engaged in the program. Of course, the monitoring program will be made by professionals and all the observations will be tested, but the people will be from the beginning, how can I say, engage in this process, just to make sure that they are aware of the problem of the oceans and they learn about all the problems that are in this kind of process. So what we make is just a process, a long-term process in which we try to construct a three-dimensional structure, I see. Also, we can add here phanerogams and of course macroalgae in these large restoration programs, permanently monitoring by the people and also profitable for the local economy, both directly through programs that are inspired to make this kind of transplantations profitable, and also for the local community, for fisheries. We can add integrated multi-trophic aquaculture in the facilities. We can make an integrated, we are making an integrative program about that. So this is the proposals and the project that we are carrying on. Now we're just starting in this Green Deal European Union program in which we want to participate, or we are participating. And here is the thing. The thing is that you have been talking about this long-term monitoring, environmental and biological, and this may be the key to make people directly pay for this kind of facilities. So you have these facilities, you have this long-term monitoring, you have this citizen science, but in which you have a business plan, and it's the people that directly pays for this kind of permanent buoys, for example, in which you have your Dopplers, you have the sediment traps, you have the monitoring of the zooplankton, and so on, and of course of the benthic community all around the world. In some way, the idea is having land and ocean areas in which you have Academy of the Sea, you have also laboratories, and on the sea, you have the transplantation facilities, and also many programs for the monitoring of the area. And we are running out of time. I have to say that we are running out of time. This is a 1999 Pauli's paper in which he stated that the complexity is over, and we have to think about to restore this kind of biodiverse structures. We are running out of big fishes, but we are also running out of corals and other organisms which make much more complex the cycles. And as said by Jackson in 2001, this is 20 years ago, the sea, again, is for the microbes. In this moment, following these steps, we just will have a very huge problem. So we have to think now about the possibility to indeed really make oases in the coastal areas to restore, not the pristine, because it will be completely impossible, but at least helpful structures in different areas of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. There's a lot of good content in that series of presentations, and I think that's reflected in the questions that we received. So I would propose that we move into a question and answer period for about 15 minutes. And I will just remind you again, as I was asked to, that 10 minutes before we are to wrap up this session, you will see a link in the chat where you can click to join a breakout that will follow this session. So I hope you'll join us there. So I have been looking through some of the questions received, and unfortunately, I cannot see all of the panelists at once. So I won't see if you raise your hand to answer. So please, when I ask a question, I'm going to direct it to the whole group. Just jump in, and we'll see how that works. I won't see you raise your hand. So there are several questions on the theme of human dimensions. And so I've tried to phrase them as one, and maybe several of you or all of you can reflect on this question, which is about how human dimensions fit into the continuum from science to policy if certain coastal communities are not considered as strategic stakeholders. And how can we better incorporate those communities, including indigenous and other traditional knowledge systems, into our coastal ocean observation systems? So again, I'd ask the panelists to please just jump in.
Well, just very briefly, in the program that we are developing, local communities are essential. So in every part that we are doing, we are just making this kind of integration, because I have been working in Brazil, for example, for some years with the people of the mangrove areas, and just making them sure that at least we understand what they want. If you don't have the consolidated point of view from the indigenous part and from the local people, I think this kind of programs are completely useless.
Yes, in Nigeria, we carry out observations in most of the communities. And when they are interested in knowing what we are doing, we have to explain to them what these observations are for. And we have to inform them about what the government intends to do with the observational results that we carry out. So the communities are very much interested. So they fit into the science and into policy enactments.
I would like also to comment. In our perspective, the involvement of these communities can gain from the use of technological solutions that can be easily affordable. It's like the low-cost sensors that I presented before, and that we can disseminate through a large number of elements of the community. But we think also that it is important that besides the understanding of the needs for their involvement and the participation in the collaboration, also to have some kind of feedback and rapid feedback, so that when they are involved and when they are conducting the measurements that we need, they can have also some feedback that makes them interested about, so they can be also interested in the observation action. So I think this could enlarge the number of members of the community that are interested in participating.
Yeah, just a quick comment in case of Brazil. I think Sergio already mentioned, but we have along the coast a huge community of fishing villages that should be explored, more explored in terms of observing, connected to our observing systems. This is, I think it's quite important.
Yes, if I could also say from South African perspective, there's often mistrust by the local communities when, if you just want to go in and do observations or deploy instrumentation. So it's very important right from the start to get their buy-in into the network that you want to establish. But it's also a two-way street because they know the sea better than we do. And to get information from them as to local conditions has often assisted us as to where's the best place to put observatory.
Thank you for those reflections. I think the next question is a good follow-on. It's a bit related. It's focused on a comment that infrastructures, funding, and capacity building are key factors for successful coastal observation system. And the question is, how can small island developing states participate if they typically lack those infrastructures, funding, and skilled human capital? So it seems to be a question about opportunities emerging.
I think I understand, for example, that Fiji Islands or Marshall Islands or other places may have huge problems of financing because some of them have not the budget to make this kind of long-term monitoring and so on. Again, I don't like it to say that, but sometimes making partly a business, this kind of things, in the framework that we are moving on, possibly just pay at least part of these large infrastructures, or may pay not the vessel, of course, but at least some of the things that you need to make this kind of long-term monitoring could be an idea.
I think this is it's a big discussion. In terms of the oceans, we need a better governance of the ocean. And if we consider that we need to understand more the ocean, the role of the small islands are very, very important. I think nowadays we lack this kind of global understanding about the oceans and a way to work together to have a better governance. I think if we advance in this sense, the role of these islands will appear easily.
Yeah, I also think that, if we had a network or a community, similar to GEOs in the offshore environment, you can have a pool of resources, as you just said, to observe the ocean as a whole, but in the coastal zone. And island states can apply for certain resources, and we can go and deploy them. That would be a way to work. But also, there's a lot of instrumentation that you can procure very cheaply, that is very valuable over the long term. So a little sensor can cost a couple of $100, but if it's been in the ocean for 20 years, the value of that data is incredible. It's worth a lot more than. So you don't have to have a full observing system with the most expensive moorings and gliders and everything. You can start small and grow it from there.
Thank you. Other thoughts? So again, a couple of questions on a theme. I'll try to merge them together a little bit. But as we're thinking about, the thought is, how can we move from fragmented scientific research and observation activities to more integrated operational observation systems? And sort of embedded in that conversation is the challenge of integrating data sets and activities across these different scientific and research initiatives. So several of the participants are looking for recommendations that might help with these issues, especially as we consider looking forward and expanding blue economy.
Well, I think that the identification of some problems that can only be addressed when we have a combined effort could promote in this kind of articulation between different operators. So perhaps this could be one of the axes of the strategies to clearly identify a number of impact of processes that have a strong impact in the society and the human activities, but can only be understood when we have the global picture that involve many partners and many actors, not on a national scale, but in the multinational scale. So perhaps this can improve our ability to interact and integrate.
This is a typical problem we have in our country, in Brazil. We have a series of, I would say, excellent scientific groups, some of them overlapping the activities, but we lack coordination. And this coordination is fundamental if we would like to use the observation systems not only to preserve the ocean, but to foster the economic development and environmental protected business in the oceans. I think this is another key issue, that is the interaction among the groups in national groups and internationally also.
Yeah, for the case of Nigeria, I think we have to address it from the sustainable funding of resources, of research work. If government research adequately, we'll be able to translate from these sort of sectoral observations to a more integrated observation and long-running observation. So that is the key for us in Nigeria. And also, when we have collaborations from other international organizations, it helps us to have a more sustainable oceanographic observations, which will translate into operational, acts or operational view of the issues that we are looking at.
Yeah, I think there are many entities, like GEOS or ILTA and those on that could take something like this on, and that has tried in the past. But what you really need is a couple of champions to drive it from each of the different countries and the different research infrastructures and observatories. to really push it hard within country and between countries. It's really worked well offshore, so it could work for the coastal systems as well.
In fact, I will ask you, my question for you, because I'm not an expert in this kind of big data set. I'm not an expert. And my question is, during the last 25 years, do you think, as a general question, is a problem of the people, is the research groups or the institutions are reluctant to give the information, or there is a non well-coordinated thing, or what do you think is the main problem?
I think, you know, the offshore community is well organized, but I think it's primarily because they are dependent on each other for ship time and vessels. So, you know, even the country with the biggest science budget is dependent on other countries for ship time for the offshore system. Whereas coastal, you can actually do a lot of your observations with small budgets. So you have research groups that apply for research funding nationally, they get it and they run off on their own. There is national programs, but because the cost is not so high, you have several. So, and each person go off on their own little tangent. There's, you know, we're not talking very big research infrastructure costs for coastal, and I think that is the biggest problem. I mean, there's so many of these little coastal initiatives all over. You don't even know which ones to belong to and be part of. But if we can all pull together, it will be beneficial to everyone. But it's difficult. But it has to do with the cost because it's cheap, I think, relatively.
And just one point, I think an additional problem is a proper organized database. I think we need some more sophisticated and updated databases for this data. It's a little bit disorganized, this database for you put your data there and you get the data when you need. This is another problem of governance, I think we should try to tackle.
You raised the question of databases and data repositories. Have any of you spent time thinking about data standardization to support and maybe facilitate submission of data from the research community to some of those repositories?
Yeah, we have been thinking about this, but I think the new technologies, digitalization and technologies and artificial intelligence, all these put the costs down for I would say, the modern database. The question is to establish the principles of these databases that should be open and should be available for all. And another point, it's convincing the companies to open some of their data for these bases, like the oil and gas industry. They have a lot of data, especially in Brazil. They have plenty of data. And if they open their data, they will improve a lot the availability of the knowledge in certain areas. I think it's questions that we should discuss and try to solve in the near future.
Yeah, in our case, this is a discussion that is being raised in this larger community, European community that I indicated, the Jericho community. So these are the type of questions and the type of subjects that we have been discussing with the European partners in order that when I mentioned the harmonization aspect and that we can discuss and can evolve by being part of this larger community. This was one of the aspects of the dissemination of the data, and that we are already disseminating data to some main centers, like the Copernicus Marine System or INPO. So this is already part of the discussion is already ongoing, but much more aspects are to be evolving in the next years as part of this Jericho community.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest costs of coastal observations is actually the development and the maintenance of these databases. I mean, you need a very big team to work on that database 24/7, indefinitely into the future, because the technology changes so quickly. We're in the age of big data, moorings that record every 5 minutes or every minute or seconds, create such a vast volume of data. And that's over and above imagery. So, you really need the funding is the important thing to develop and maintain these databases.